Welcome back to Jazzish, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we are joined by saxophonist and composer Hiruy Tirfe. Hailing from Philadelphia, Tirfe has shared studio and stage with blockbuster artists like The Roots, Solange, DJ Jazzy Jeff, Patti LaBelle, Brandy the Stylistics, and many, many others. In early 2024, he released his debut album as leader, 10,000 Hours. Since its release, the album has garnered praise from Downbeat, which gave the album 4 stars, and it was also named one of the top recordings of 2024 by critic Dan Willett. Heroy also was named winner of the DC Jazz Festival's Jazz Pre competition last year and continues to gig all over the place. Heroy Tirfe, welcome to Jazzish and WIUP.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Amazing intro.
You've done some amazing work. So speaking of which, I mean, you've got such a rich and impressive resume collaborating with and supporting so many other artists. What made you decide that it was a time to record your own album?
That's a good question. As you said, a lot of the work that I've been doing in my early stages of, just kind of being in the music industry has been that supporting musician role, whether being on stage with artists or being in the studio with artists, doing stuff for television for artists. All those experiences were great. And it was even greater that I got to learn the business of it all very, very well. Um, so just learning about that, I kind of gained the knowledge that, if I want to put out a record, I want to put it out in this kind of way, just so it can make the appeal to as many people as I can. And on the flip side, me personally as an artist, I felt like I had something to kind of contribute to where the state of jazz is at the time I put out the record. There's a lot of young people out with amazing records, a lot of young people touring, all that kind of stuff. So, I just felt as though at the time, especially considering it is a conceptual record, 10,000 hours, of course, based off the Malcolm Gladwell theory, I just had something to say. And, I had great people in the studio, great special guest artists as well. So, yeah, the time was then, the time was now, so.
And you mentioned this sort of conceptual framework of the record, and you make that pretty explicit straight out the gate from the intro, drawing on the 10,000 hours theory, as you said, popularized by Malcolm Gladwell. And there's been, like anything, there's been plenty of debate about the validity of that specific argument, that many hours, et cetera, et cetera. But the
Right.
point stands that it takes a great deal of time and dedication to hone a craft. And I was curious, just thinking about this and preparing for today, it made me wonder, what's been your own practice routine and how has that evolved over the years?
A lot has changed from 10 years ago to now. You know what I'm saying? So obviously when it comes to just general practice now, I'm a grown man, we're grown men, you know what I'm saying? So obviously I can't spend 6 hours in the practice room as I did back when I was a student at the University of the Arts or before when I was in high school and whatnot. So definitely now I'm in a state where, quality versus quantity. I'm a big believer, especially now in my life, considering I just have just so much going on. I can get as much done in 45 minutes as I did in 6 hours. So writing and producing and arranging for a lot of artists and other people's records and whatnot. Uh, I just try to tackle that as much as that as I can. In addition to just making sure, me myself, I'm just on top of everything that I need to be on top of as an artist, as a saxophonist. Um, yeah. So when I was growing up, I mean, it was like I said, it was like 6 hours. I was learning tunes, I was transcribing solos, I was just doing everything I could to make sure, because I knew later on in life that that time is probably not going to be as apparent or as welcoming, I should say. So I definitely listened to all my teachers in terms of make sure I use up a lot of my time back then when I was a teenager to really make sure I just lock in, hone in, and make sure I solidify everything then so it doesn't turn into a problem later on in life. So more attention to detail, which I still do today. But like I said earlier, is definitely more quality versus quantity simply because there's a lot on my plate and I'm just trying to make sure everything is as satisfactory as possible, especially when I'm working with other people. So
Yeah, sure. But that efficiency you have now is because you were spending 6 hours, 7 hours a day when you could have been doing whatever else, playing Xbox, right?
yeah, exactly.
You had mentioned, the people you worked with on this record, and I admit, a lot of names that I was not familiar with, but just some really great playing on the record. I thought maybe you could say a little bit about the folks that you brought on board for the 10,000 hours.
Absolutely, for sure. All the musicians on 10,000 Hours are from Philadelphia and the surrounding areas. So my core band, so my quartet that I used, The musicians on there is I had Luke Carlos O'Reilly on piano. He's an amazing musician himself, a solo artist in his own right, and he's actually signed to Orrin Evans' Imani Records label, and I believe he has 2 records under that label. I had Matt Kepler on upright bass, a musician that I've been using for years. I had a good friend, Lionel Forster Jr. of mine. We go all the way back since kindergarten in West Philadelphia. He was on drums for the majority of the record. Lionel has worked a lot with this R&B group called All for One. He did a bunch of one-offs with Randy Brecker, and he has a couple stuff that's coming out on his own as well in the next coming weeks. I also had Steve McKee on drums for some of the songs. Steve McKee used to play drums for Bilal. He also produced for Jill Scott and Vivian Green. Went on tour with Bilal. I think him and Robert Glasper are like real tight and whatnot. Who else did I use? I used my man Aaron Good on trombone. He's on the track called Incentive. Aaron has been playing trombone for John Legend for, I want to say, 10 years at this point. My other special guest, I had a good friend of mine. Her name is Mare. She was on Live Your Life, Take Control, as well as No Saving, the extended version and the radio edit. She was on Tiny Desk not too long ago as a musical director, keyboardist, and background vocalist for Tierra Whack. She also was doing background work for Lauryn Hill. I think she did Jimmy Kimmel with Ari Lennox. And then I also had Sierra Chantel as a special guest poet, and she has a lot of stuff under her own belt too. So even if the names of the people that I use as my supporting musicians / guest artists may not be like kind of world-renowned names, so to say, and I say that in quotes, they've definitely done a lot to contribute to the music industry, whether as a supporting musician or musical director or solo artist in their own right. And, I'm a big believer, just you obviously want the best people to kind of help support your sound. And the cool thing about the people that I've used is that not only are they great supporting musicians and supporting vocalists as well, but they're also leaders in their own right. So, I've got a whole bunch of leaders, I rallied up the troops, so to say. And, we spent 2 6-hour days at the studio in Philly called Rittenhouse Soundwork Studio, which is up in Germantown, part of Philadelphia. The Sun Ra Orchestra records there a lot. Yeah. Marshall Allen and everybody. So, there's a bunch of other musicians kind of filtered in the mix as well, but those are kind of like the main guys and girls that I just want to mention. And like I said, everybody is either from Philadelphia. We did have some representation from Camden, New Jersey. Shout out to Michael Spearman. Shout out to Daniel Spearman, the Spearman brothers. And like I said before, all the guys and girls on this record are leaders in their own right. And I wholeheartedly recommend for people to check out their work as well, because, they're doing it. They're out here making it happen.
For sure. And as you were saying, even if they're names that we maybe don't recognize, again, from those resumes, we've probably heard them.
Yeah, absolutely. Or seen them. So.
Yeah. And I think the chemistry between these folks is on display throughout the record. But as we were talking before, one cut that really stuck out to me was NFF.
Right.
And I think just for my own personal taste, I think, it's got this great drive from the rhythm section. And was that Lionel on drums there?
Yeah, Lionel Forster Jr. He lost his mind when it was his solo. So
that solo is ridiculous. Could you say a little bit about that track and how you brought it all together with everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. So that song really came to be because, all right, I actually never told the story before, so this is an exclusive for you guys over at IUP. So NFF actually stands for not for free. Okay, not for free. Okay, we're all Kendrick Lamar fans. Okay, Kendrick Lamar has a song called For Free, which is off the Pimp the Butterfly album that came out a couple years ago, right? That was a song, if you really, for all the musicians out there, if they dissect it, is really the same chord changes to Mr. PC by John Coltrane, C minor blues, whatever. So we would cover that song live a lot. Me, Lionel, Matt Kepler, and Luke O'Reilly, right? I didn't necessarily want to cover that song to say, but I wanted to kind of keep that same kind of iteration of how we usually do that song, but make it into something our own. So I just simply switched the key. I kept some, kind of the same elements of how we usually do the song live in terms of, kind of playing the melody once and then having people take solos and then kind of reinstating that melody again and having Lionel kind of like lose his mind towards the end. That's really how it came. And it kind of came out of a happy accident, so to say, because we were in rehearsals. We rehearsed at Luke's house, actually, for this record. We did one rehearsal at Luke's house, and then we had a couple gigs and whatnot. And then while I had some prepared music already charted out to give to the guys, we would still kind of make up stuff on our own and whatnot. And NFF was kind of coming from one of those experiences. So that's kind of how it came to be.
Excellent. Let's share it with the listeners now. Here is NFF by Heroy Tirfe from his debut album, 10,000 Hours. NFF by Hiruy Tirfe from his debut album 10,000 Hours, and we have Heroy with us here on Jazzish tonight. You've spoken at length elsewhere about your parents being a major source of inspiration for you, and we get to hear them on this record, telling their story of coming to this country from Asmara, Eritrea, and the challenges and triumphs of their journey. It's a really touching piece, and they're clearly a major inspiration for you in many ways. I'm curious, what about your parents' story or their character informed your musical life?
Man, like you said, moving to a brand new country at a time that they did, it's not an easy task. And of course, it's easier said than done, but it's easier said than done times 15. Both of my parents did not have a lot of funds to, at the time, kind of sustain themselves in a brand new country. My dad, before both of my parents moved to Philadelphia, my father and two of his other brothers, my uncles, they were cab drivers in New York City. My one uncle still to this day still drives cabs in New York City, up at Upper East Side or whatever. So when we talked before, kind of like dedication to your craft and, kind of putting in those set of hours to your craft, you know what I'm saying? I personally don't know anybody else besides my mom and dad to come to a brand new country, work minimum wage jobs at parking lots at like the Amtrak station in Philly or other parking lots in South Street, go back to school, obtain a degree, get a better job, start a family, buy a house, buy multiple properties in Southwest Philadelphia, which is close to Philly Airport. One of my first memories was my father going back to school so he can get a degree so he can actually be a building engineer. You know what I'm saying? He was a building engineer. He was like the lead building engineer at the Marriott Hotel in Conshohocken, which is not too far away from Philadelphia. I think he was there for like 30 some years up until his retirement this past October. My mom worked in parking lots and then being a nursing assistant and had to go to going through the education process to obtain that degree so she can actually have a better job with better sustainability. You know what I'm saying? My father talked about that in the record. He was cool with the parking lot, but then he had to realize that, that's not something, there's no future in that. You know what I'm saying? So essentially they had to put themselves in situations where, they could see a better future for themselves because, the goal was to have a family. I'm their firstborn. You know what I'm saying? My name, Heroy, is actually the main language in Eritrea is called Tigrinya. Okay. So Heroy means the chosen one or the selected one. So me being firstborn from my parents in a brand new country, I was the chosen one to essentially, kind of inspire my younger siblings as well. So all the tribes and tribulations that my parents had to go through just have a better lifestyle in a brand new country. I saw that firsthand, you know what I'm saying? And then obviously, my younger siblings came into the situation, came into the mix, so to say. And we saw that firsthand. And it was amazing to see because the way I want to not just continue my musical career, but just my life, I had two role models to kind of base everything that I do off of, you know what I'm saying? And which is also funny too, because, I may complain about something when I was younger or something like that. And then my father was like, do you know what me and your brother had to do to get to where we are right now? So, it had forced me to kind of change my mindset on a lot of different things. But yeah, like you said, those were two major inspirations to do all the things I want to do and accomplish all the things I want to accomplish. And I'm super grateful. I thank God every day that I have two great parents that A, support me and A, lead by example.
Zooming back out to the album as a whole, we're over a year past the release of 10,000 Hours, and obviously it's a great deal of work to compose, record, release, and market a record. From maybe that initial excitement of the album's release in January 24, can you tell us, what's that journey been like of having it out there in the world?
Man, it was absolutely phenomenal. Like you said, it's been over a year since the record's been released. It's out on every digital platform. We also have CDs. We also have vinyl. Available on www.heroyturf.org for those that want to go grab that. Yeah, I think, what I had to say has been solidified. History has been made, in terms of just kind of putting out my own music, representing Philadelphia in the process, representing still Philadelphia now. Philadelphia has a rich musical and cultural legacy of the music. I'm not going to waste the time to talk about all the people that came out of Philadelphia. Google can tell everybody that. But it's been great. I'm starting to see my name more on jazz marquees, you know what I'm saying? Or headlining jazz clubs now. It's great to perform the DC Jazz Festival, as you talked about earlier. Not even, just winning the competition, but just being there as a solo artist. A lot of the stuff that I've done, as I said earlier, I was grateful to do major gigs like the Roots Picnic and Made in America. I've done a couple, you talked about Solange earlier. My first gig with Solange was for like Dave Chappelle's residency at Radio City Music Hall. So, it was great to play a lot of those big stages, but as opposed to a supporting artist, now the main artist, So it's been great. You know what I'm saying? I definitely went in on the promotion and the marketing. I hired like a radio promoter. Shout out to Nicole Sweeney, formerly on Sirius XM. Shout out to my man, Chris DiGirolamo from upstate New York, doing my PR. I went hard. I like bought like billboards in New Jersey just to kind of put the word out the record. And if anything, it inspires me even more just to keep doing what I'm doing.
Drilling down to a specific track here, I think that Second Nature might be my favorite track on the record. Just again, the rhythm and the groove really draw me in, but I think like NFF and so much of the album, it's really all in how it all comes together into this unified piece. And whether discussing Second Nature or the album more generally, these arrangements feel so meticulous and really well thought out. And I'm just wondering, at what point do you really start thinking about pulling all the pieces together?
It's never really one way, to be honest. Sometimes when I present the music to the guys, everything's already laid out. You know what I'm saying, in terms of how we're going to roadmap it all and what have you. Sometimes I kind of let the authenticity of the vibe, for lack of better terms, of the guys in the crew to kind of dictate how that's going to be. I'm always open for input, and the reason why I use those guys is because I trust them, not just on a supporting level, but to kind of bring in input as well. And sometimes things just kind of happen, kind of what I talked about earlier, those happy mistakes, so to say, just like how NFF came to be, that was kind of like a happy mistake, so to be. And it was like, yo, we gotta put that on wax. You know what I'm saying? I feel as though as artists and musicians, we just gotta be open. It's great to kind of stick with one way and kind of having that be the only way for some people. But at the end of the day, if things come to be and you're not willing to kind of accept what it is, then, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. So me personally, whether having something already laid out, having the guys give their input, or having things come to be, it's what makes the process such a great process. And, on the flip side of it, kind of like what you're talking about, you can kind of hear the vibe through the wax.
Is there anything specific you can share about Second Nature?
Second Nature kind of came to be. So obviously, like, each track kind of gives a theme of the 10,000 hour theory, right? Whether it's like, the intro, or like a cry for help, where, it's like very chaotic and you're just really, really, really trying to gain need and gain attention of just, assistance and help. Or the actual 10,000 hours track itself, when you talk about, kind of reaching that level, so to say. Second Nature kind of describes like when you've done something so many times and that repetition is there. It's kind of like, you're doing it is kind of that second nature itself. It's like, oh, you can just walk up to whatever you want to do and you don't even have to think about it, because, you've already gone through the repetition to whatever, you want to achieve. So that's kind of how it came to be. You know what I'm saying? It was when I rehearsed with the guys, I kind of let them know kind of the emotion behind it. It's just simply because, like I said, I definitely want that emotion to kind of come through the wax as well. So when we rehearsed this, I was kind of talking to the guys, and I was like, well, this is more like, how do you feel when you've, tried something over and over again? You probably failed a couple times, but then it came to be, that light bulb came off. You know what I'm saying? That's whatever that emotion is, whatever you define it as, whatever it's called out there in the world. That's kind of how this tune is supposed to feel.
Great. And we'll hear Second Nature momentarily. But before we do, I want to remind listeners that Hiruy Tirfe's debut album, 10,000 Hours, is out now, available directly from his website. That's hiruytirfe.org, HIRUYTIRFE.org. The album's there on CD, it's on vinyl, it's streaming. You can find other cool merch on the website as well, learning more about Hiruy and his music. Take a look at his performance schedule. There's some shows coming up in Philly and DC, not so far from us here in Indiana. Could be a good excuse for a weekend getaway. Is there anything else that you want to promote while we've got you here, Hiruy?
Yeah, definitely check out the website, as you said. Also follow me on Instagram at Hiruy_Tirfe 26, HIRUY_TIRFE 26. I'm also on Facebook. You can just find Hiruy Tirfe artist page. We're working on album number 2 this summer. We're going to go into the studio probably July, August. I'm not going to tell you what the name of the album is yet. We finally came up with the concept. But I am happy to announce that I'm collaborating with a good friend of mine. His name is Keith Phelps out of Atlanta, Georgia. Keith and I met doing the Patti LaBelle gig, actually. He's just amazingly dope keyboardist, producer, songwriter, rapper. And, I've even flown him up to Philly a couple times to do some gigs for like the Mid-Atlantic Jazz Festival and a bunch of other stuff as well. So I can definitely announce that we're definitely collaborating on a couple of stuff. And of course, I'm writing a few things as well. Also happy to announce that I'm also collaborating with my good brother, V. Shane Fredericks, a great singer out of Philadelphia. I arranged a version of the classic Duke Ellington tune Caravan for his next album. That'll come out April the 4th, which I believe is that first Friday of April. So I arranged it. I also produced it as well. So make sure you support my Philly brother, V. Shane Fredericks. And like he said, check out my website, check out my Instagram. A lot of good things is coming here in 2025. So don't fall asleep, man. Make sure you catch up and make sure you stay tuned.
For sure. Keep us posted on that record whenever that's ready.
Absolutely.
We can't wait to hear it. I'm still digesting this one, so we've got plenty of music from you to keep us company. Congrats on the record, Heroy. We love it. Thank you so much for your time tonight, and we hope to see you soon.
It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much.